And okay, we're live. Excellent, excellent. Welcome to Jailhouse Law. It's my very new channel. And I got to talk about the Disinformation Board because the DHS Disinformation Board, there are new developments that have just happened. And so I'm on Twitter, saw that Taylor Lorenz, who's a reporter, and I'll get into more about her. She's actually started reporting about the resign about the head of the Disinformation Board resigning. So this is going to be interesting. Wow. So the for if you're not familiar, the Disinformation Board, there was for years really, the government's been touting this alarm about, oh, we have to worry about disinformation. And this was really big around 2016. This was really big because government felt some type of way about the let me just change this. The government felt some type of way about Trump winning. So and people in the government, I'll say, yeah. So people in the government felt some type of way about Trump winning. And so now they were like, okay, we got the reason why he won, like they wanted to point fingers at all in all different directions. So one of the directions where they pointed the fingers was, hey, we have to there was so much disinformation coming from internet and social media. And Trump did use social media to get his message out there. Of course, when information was going out there to support Trump or to help his campaign, they're calling it disinformation. But when people are putting information out there to help Hillary, whether accurate, spun or not, it's just information. And so this is part of the problem with the Disinformation Board, because from that moment on, you're seeing that the government was so focused on this message of we've got to stop them. Oh, we've got to stop people from receiving disinformation from social media, from Facebook, from Twitter. They actually attacked Facebook and Twitter, like, listen, y'all have to do something. And so that's why when we fast forward to 2020, we see a completely different scenario. We see them handling Twitter in a very different, we see them handling the election in a very different way, covering the election so differently than they had covered it in 2016. And it's because of this pressure from people that were upset, that didn't like the result and didn't like the fact that there were factors outside of their control that changed the outcome of the election. Because the mainstream establishment assumes we've got, the media, and we can just make sure that the people will, this is the message we put, this is the message we're pushing, this is what people are going to do. And then they realized that they underestimated the effect and the strength of social media and its power to change people's minds. But from that point, they were the arguments they were making, and I'm watching this. I'm like, the arguments you're making have no merit. Like, I don't care if people are putting, fake information for. So here's the thing. When I say I don't care if people are putting information out there like, oh, Trump is going to end world hunger. Trump is going to do it. It's up to individuals to do their research and make decisions. The powers that be have never had a problem with the populace being dumbed down, being not doing research, and just believing what they're told until the populace started believing what they were told by somebody other than the powers that be. That was the problem. The problem wasn't that people are dumbed down and that, because if that's the problem, then they needed to be focused on other things like the educational system, like the horrible, sorry excuse for an educational system that has people just so that they'll see a headline, do no further reading, and just run with it, and then and even get into arguments and debates over something that they just read a headline and they have no further information on. But guess what? That's where America is, and America didn't get there by accident. And the powers that be don't care that America's there. They just assumed that they would be the ones in control of the headlines. And social media has changed that, because social media now allows a lot of other people to have a lot a wider reach and reach so many people with similar tactics. So they can just put these headlines out and say, hey, this is what it is. Uh, you know, Trump is the greatest thing on earth. And now a bunch of people go, okay, Trump is the greatest thing. Trump is going to save America. Okay, Trump is going to, but they're like, no, we're the ones only ones that are supposed to be sending a message. So when it says Hillary's going to save America, regardless, it doesn't matter if there's any facts behind it, but they have no problem with people just going with that information and running with it, as long as it's information they're putting out. So, case in point, the whole thing of Tulsi Gabbard being a Russian agent, because this is amazing. I had actually talked about that. So when she came out, when Hillary Clinton gets on the news, gets on that podcast, I think it was David Axelrod's podcast or something, and she says something about, and she basically takes some subliminals at Tulsi, suggesting like she sees a Russian agent. People in the media, people out here, just social media, everybody's running with it. Oh yeah, Tulsi's a Russian agent. I remember I'm having a conversation with somebody. They're like, no, she's a Russian agent. That explains it. That's what she's doing. I'm like, this woman was a vice chair of the DNC, and she's a sitting member of Congress. If she was a Russian agent, this would be more than just Hillary Clinton saying something on a podcast. This would be an investigation, which would most likely end with Tulsi Gabbard in handcuffs. But people just ran with it. Then her press guy, her PR guy, Hillary's PR guy, comes out and says, "Oh yeah, no, well, we weren't talking about Tulsi Gabbard, but the media still ran with it." So, like on The View, they still kept running with that nonsense. And then you had a whole bunch of people that did no research, but yeah, she's a Russian agent. And to this day, you still have people that will run around calling Tulsi Gabbard a Russian agent, despite the fact that she was a sitting member of Congress. If she was a Russian agent, criminal charges would have ensued. And despite the fact that Hillary, the first person that actually floated it out there, recanted, said, no, I wasn't talking about her. But people are still running with that. Why? Because people don't do research. This is where we are as a country. But now that's when there's no problem with that. There's no problem with people being that gullible, as long as they're believing a narrative that serves the powers that be. Cool. But when you see that Trump wasn't supposed to win the election, Trump won the election in 2016, then they say, okay, we got to do something. And now they actually started coming after social media companies and even the algorithm. So if you're on YouTube, there are independent media sources on YouTube that saw the algorithm change. And this was at the behest of the government, where the government says, hey, no, government and big media says, no, you've got to rely on push trusted sources first. Listen, people, if the algorithm is responding to what people want to see, then there's no promoting CNN. If people want to watch CNN, they'll watch CNN. But the social media and even YouTube said, okay, this is what you want, this is what we'll do. So YouTube went ahead, and that's why you'll see these trusted media sources being pushed first ahead of other independent media. Now, when you fast forward to where we're at right now, and excuse me, you have somebody like Elon Musk talking about buying Twitter. They're like, okay, no, because it looks like they're they're concerned that Elon won't listen to them the same way that other past CEOs have listened to them. So they say, hey, we're gonna create this DHS Disinformation Board. And so yeah, let me actually talk about the launch of the Disinformation Board. So if we even look back at and they're calling it. So I've read articles about it, and like this article I'm about to discuss describes it in some very non-threatening terms. It's don't worry, this is not a threat. Just be cool. This is easy. We're not going to do anything wrong. We're just here to help. Yeah, four words that should scare the hell out of you when the government says we're here to help. Four words that should scare the hell out of you. So yeah, this article is out of Politico, and it's talking about what the Disinformation Board is supposed to be. And amongst things, it starts by discussing how people on the right and Fox News are upset, and they're loudest voices. And Republicans are up in arms. And it says that because of this, the Secretary of Homeland Security had to address the allegations on multiple Sunday shows. But they said now it's dramatic, but even though it didn't start dramatic. So the whole point of it being dramatic doesn't mean that there wasn't an issue. It just means y'all were trying to promote it as, oh no, this is no threat to anybody. This is just be cool. This isn't going to bother anything. This isn't going to change anything. And of course, if it's not going to change anything, why does it exist? But this is the nonsense that they routinely do. So it says it hasn't even convened its first meeting, but already the Disinformation Governance Board, a small group created to work on a complicated problem, has become a big headache. What's the complicated problem? Because one of the biggest sources of disinformation is the government. And we can look back at for something like the Iraq War. Like I said, one of the biggest sources of disinformation is the government. So in this article, they're talking about how he used, of course, January 6th as part of the reason why this is needed, because we need to combat disinformation. Once again, this is what I say. If people are gullible, if people are dumb, that's on people. If people are just listening to something somebody's saying without actually vetting it, that's on them. You can't like this at some point it has to be either people as adults have to just be smarter, and if not, have to deal with consequences of stupid decisions, or like there is no that's it. People just have to be smarter. Because this idea that oh yeah, they just believed they believe disinformation. Okay, well they could have done research. But guess what? On all sides, there's a bunch of people that aren't doing research, that aren't actually looking into to matters. They're listening to sound bites and running with them. They're reading headlines and then calling themselves experts, and then just acting like, okay, yes, this is what it is. Okay, wait, how do you know that? Well, yes, because this article says this. Wait, did you actually read the article, or you just read the headline? And even if you read the article, did you check the sources? Did you check the veracity? And are you reading in between the lines to be able to make a determination as to whether the information contained in the article is accurate? But so he's talking about malicious internet activity that fed virtually every problem the department faced. And so they're talking about domestic violent extremists threatening members of Congress, human smugglers enticing migrants by spreading lies about U.S. border policy. So at that point, it tells me like they probably threw that in there because they said, "Hey, if we throw this in there, the right will like the right will actually like the disinformation board." Uh, Fortunately, that one didn't work. But hey, listen, I've seen a lot of this stuff that the government does, where it's couching up these authoritarian policies, behind cultural war issues, and people are going for it. So in this case, that particular one didn't work. They're talking about Russian intelligence officers posting false claims about U.S. elections, but once again, that's up to people to actually do the work, do the research, and come to decisions. If your educational system has done its job, correction, if your educational system's job was to actually help people become to critically think, then this wouldn't be so much of an issue. But if your educational system is intentionally designed to dumb people down, to just accept, to just obey authority, okay, this is how we get to a position where now you have to worry about, oh no, if they see a headline, they might just do something stupid. Uh, DHS leadership stood up a working group on the issue, and so basically what they wanted to do was create this group that they're saying is we're not going to have power. We're just going to make suggestions. Yeah, yeah, that because even if that's how it starts, that no, two things. That's not how it's going to end. And the second thing is that's not how you even intended to end. That's how you intended to operate while everybody's looking. As soon as everybody looks away, that's when you're going to start making changes. And then suddenly people are going to look back and it's going to be a completely different entity. So they said it's Washington. So the working group concluded there needed to be another new group working on these issues. And so he said they're not sitting there saying, "Hey, what should we do about Russian disinformation?" Focusing on XYZ. That he says they're focusing on information being gathered and collected under different sets of legal authorities, and says, "What's the appropriate way to share this information so we're not in conflict?" It, they are, like I said, this is all a smokescreen to basically put certain individuals in, because if you look at what's happened with social media these past couple of years, you realize, and that's kind of where they played their hand, they overplayed their hand, because we can look and see, okay, wait a minute, no, we've seen this one before. Like, yeah, I've seen this before. So it's not gonna, bunch of people aren't going to fall for this, especially people on the right, because this is a creation of the left designed to do the bidding of the left. But what really did it, what really just absolutely lit the spark and blew that powder keg up, was who they decided to pick as the head. They said, "Hey, we're gonna pick the head of the disinformation board to be Nina Jankowicz." So she had managed programs for Russia and Belarus for the National Democratic Institute, and she had advised the Ukrainian government. So they call her a disinformation expert. I'm actually going to talk more about some of her activities as a different disinformation expert prior to becoming the head of this DHS, uh, this disinformation government governance board. But when they broke the news of her being hired and of the board's existence, the the powder keg was lit because people started looking at who she was. And so it's like she had stuff on TikTok, which was was putting commentary on disinformation, and she did like a parody of a Mary Poppins song. And so Jen Psaki is, of course, one of the people that comes out and defends her work. On May 2nd, so according to this political story, on May 2nd, the department released a brief, a fact sheet that said the board was set up with the explicit goal of ensuring that protections for Americans' rights and privacy are appropriately incorporated across DHS disinformation-related work. If we've watched what they've done with social media, if we've watched what they've demanded with social media, we know that's complete and utter bull. We know that's a lie because we watch what they've done with social media and the demands they've made of social media. For instance, I think it was like last year when Jen Psaki's talking about, oh, if somebody says something, spreads disinformation on one social media site, the other social media sites should coordinate and ban them from their platforms as well. Oh, yes, but we want to respect the people's First Amendment rights. Come on. That's clearly, obviously not true. Obviously that has never been true. But what's even more enlightening is that if we just look at what's happened over the past couple of years of how certain things that were disinformation actually turn out to be accurate information, and then the official information turns out to have been the actual disinformation, and we've seen this repeatedly. But there's no acknowledgement of that. There's no accountability for that. So when an expert is telling people to do something or telling people not to do something, which actually puts them at risk, no accountability, zero accountability, none, not a lick. But then that same public official is somebody that they are then relying and putting on this pedestal as the only reliable source. So, but once the fact sheet came out, a bunch of Republicans just started attacking, and these are like congressional Republicans, of course, pundits as well. I think the really interesting thing that happened was when Nina Jankowicz went on. She was in some kind of meeting, and there's footage of this on Twitter. And she's in a meeting and she's talking about how she thinks that Twitter should have an edit button. And what she means by an edit button is not that I can go and edit my tweets. She's saying that Twitter should have an edit button. So two things she said: that they should have an edit button, and an edit function that certain people, and I wonder who these certain people are. Certain people can go that aren't employees of Twitter. So once again, she's saying certain people that aren't employees of Twitter can go and make adjustments to people's information. So if somebody types something on Twitter, let's say I type something on Twitter, and this person doesn't like what I said, they can go and say, oh, this is false information, or this is unreliable information, oh, this is misinformation, this is disinformation, this is unverified. They can go ahead and do that. And my point is, like, no, we're adults. Like, it's my job as an adult to be able to read something and say, is this based on reality? So if somebody comes out with the tweet saying, oh, R. Kelly just got out of prison, all charges dropped and reversed, I can either be an idiot, run down the street, say, oh, wow, R. Kelly's out, or I can actually start looking up information to verify if that's true. That's how things should work in terms of not even that's how that everybody should act, but that should be the answer to disinformation, and that should be the only thing that people that they should be promoting in terms of say, hey, people, do some research. That's it. But they don't want people to do research because a lot of times the people spreading disinformation are them. That's the point. They don't want people to be intelligent. They don't want people to do their due diligence. They don't want people fact checking sources. Why? Because they want people to blindly listen, to blindly obey, to blindly follow what they say. That's it. They don't have a problem with people not doing research, not actually doing due diligence and seeing if the stuff that's being said is accurate or true. They just want to make sure they're the ones saying it. But she gets on and says, "Oh yeah, so this edit function should have," and she talks about verified people. I said, "Oh yeah, by the way, a bunch of people that shouldn't be verified on Twitter. Uh, well, they're real people, but they're not trustworthy." Bitch, you're not trustworthy. Like, what are you talking about? You're not trustworthy. And and we'll get to why this right now, because immediately she goes into describing, oh yes, so what if Donald Trump is talking about the election and he says this, and then somebody could, okay, so here's the point. This is why you've proven that you're not trustworthy, because you're a partisan hack. That's why you are a partisan hack. You immediately go to, oh yes, disinformation, Trump. Automatically you go to that as a source of disinformation, which makes it clear that you have a bias, and that if you were that arbiter, if Nina Jankowicz was that arbiter of truth, that bias, she would ignore her bias, in terms of she would ignore that she has a bias, and that bias would be prevalent and evident in everything she's doing and what she considers disinformation and not, what she chooses to curate and what she chooses to well, no, people can understand the nuance, because there's a bunch of spin out there from all sides, but you'll see that there are people who are on either side that will only criticize the spin when it's coming from the other side. So no, she's not a reliable source. But oh yeah, let me get to the news. Let me get to the actual news. This morning, Nina, in fact, I think it was this morning. That could be that could be disinformation right there. But this morning, Nina Jankowicz has resigned. She has resigned. So, okay, yes, let me pull up some of this stuff. And so right now I'm on Twitter, and Dinesh D'Souza posted, Nina Jankowicz resigns as Biden's Ministry of Truth boss. So the Taylor Lorenz actually wrote a story in the Washington Post. Now, let me tell you, I'm not paying. A lot of these stories are behind paywalls. I'm not paying to read the Washington. I'm not paying to get behind the paywall, but there have been people who have put certain excerpts of the material out there. So I'll give just the gist. But if you want to read the story, if you have a subscription to the Washington Post, you can check that out. Like I said, that story I have not read, because I'm not paying to read that. So yeah, a lot of people are saying Nina Jankowicz has officially resigned, and the DHS has paused the Disinformation Governance Board. So Newsmax has something out, and they're saying she announced her resignation Wednesday in a statement. Okay, yeah, because CNN did report it as well, right? Yeah. So, and by the way, that's what, like, I didn't just go from one source, having read the headline, because yeah. So here's the CNN story. I have it right here. And so they and it's interesting, because different sources will present it a different way. And so the description of how Taylor Lorenz is posting it, they're saying is Taylor Lorenz is posting it, and oh, she was attacked and maligned, and the right wing is horrible, and the government should have protected her. And I'm like, no, we're adults. We should be making our own decisions and determinations, and have the ability to read, comprehend, and research. So yeah, CNN says, despite her expertise, Critics argue she holds biases on certain issues. Are you like CNN? Critics argue she holds biases. CNN, are you suggesting she doesn't have biases? For instance, in a TikTok video posted prior to her appointment to lead the board, Jankowicz singled out Rudy Giuliani and TikTok influencers to a Mary Poppins jingle. And so they were trying to enhance the public's trust in the group. But if you, like I said, if you've got a partisan hack, which she clearly is, no, of course people aren't going to trust the people that buy into her level, her version of partisan hackery will trust it. But there's a bunch of us that don't buy into that partisan hackery, and we're like, no, no, that's ridiculous. And so they're talking about how the concept of the board dates back to last year, and they wanted to provide guidance on policies and privacy protection. See, but that was not their see. There's certain things that they're talking about, privacy and policy protection, and sorry, privacy protection questions. That's what they're selling to the public. That's not their primary concern, and that's not even their intention. And we know it's not their intention because, like I said, we've watched what the government has done with relation to social media just over the past several years. Over the past several years, we've seen that regardless of who is, they don't like when information critical of their side comes out. So no, government cannot be trusted to control social media. And if you take a look at the fact that both sides are trying to stop Section 230, that in itself should tell you everything you need to know. Because without Section 230, there's no social media as it exists today. If Twitter is responsible for everything that's on Twitter, you think regular people have access to Twitter? Or just trusted sources? If YouTube is responsible for everything on YouTube, you think regular people start YouTube channels? Or is it just CNN, MSNBC, these mega rich corporations, which will have to provide certain assurances that they'll do certain vetting for before YouTube allows these videos? Same with Facebook. Same with True Social. Same with Getter. Same with Parler. All of these, like, because that's the thing. People are saying, oh, well, 230 is protecting. No, 230 allows all of these social media sites to exist. Now it's up to each social media site to engage in policies and methods to make it more successful, but that's the company's job. It's not the government's job. It's not the government's job to make True Social more successful. It's not the government's job to break up Twitter because Twitter's too successful. It's not the government's job. If you want to beat Twitter, make something better than Twitter. But with 230, with Section 230, it allows regular people like me, like many of you watching, to make the decision for yourself whether or not, you know, and basically to be able to get that your messages out, whatever you want to say out, whether people agree with it, people disagree with it, people like it, and even whether or not it's accurate. So, yeah, CNN talks about the Disinformation Governance Board focuses first on disinformation surrounding human migration. See, you can tell that's a talking point. The fact that they're talking about disinformation regarding immigration, they're clearly using that. They were clearly using that talking point to try to get the right people on the right to jump on board with it. But once you appointed Nina Jankowicz, people on the right were not going to go with the story. And so, yeah, and Washington Post was the first one to report it. And that story was written by Taylor Lorenz. Okay, so yeah, let's do a quick story about Taylor Lorenz, because Taylor Lorenz was in the news and in the social media news recently because of several things. She doxed So yeah, she did an article talking about who was the woman behind this Twitter account, the Libs of TikTok, and it'll take videos of liberals and unflattering videos of liberals and put them, you know, boom, like here's how crazy liberals are, and put them out there. So she did a story basically, oh, this is who this woman is, and blah blah blah. And people were like, wait a minute, aren't you the same one that was on some show, I think it was MSNBC, crying about how people are harassing you and attacking you, and you're getting all this bullying over social media, and then you go ahead and put somebody else out there, you know, reveal who their actual identity and stuff like that. So that's where she has gotten a lot of notoriety. In fact, I think Tim Pool actually put a billboard in Times Square about her. Yeah, an electronic billboard. I'm pretty sure he did. Let me just double check that. Tim Pool, Taylor Lorenz, Taylor Lorenz. Let me. So Tim Pool billboard. So it says Tim Pool and the CEO of the Daily Wire took out a giant billboard in Times Square in a today in an attempt to discredit my reporting. Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the things Tim Pool did. And let me see if I can picture Taylor Lorenz docs. Yeah. So so this is, I'm actually looking at her tweet right now. And her tweet says Tim Pool and the CEO of the Daily Wire took out a giant billboard in Times Square in an attempt to discredit my reporting on libs of TikTok. This was from April 26th. So this was a couple of weeks ago. And the billboard's this big billboard saying Taylor Lorenz doxed at libs of TikTok. So as you can see, she's well adored by people on the right. Okay, so I'm looking at tweets from people criticizing her past statements, because now that it's breaking, people are coming out with more information, and people are discussing it. Yeah, so people are talking about how she has that how she had came out and said she wanted verified Twitter users to edit other people's tweets. Like that's ridiculous. But it shows like a level of, well, I'm clearly smarter than all of you, so I should be making decisions for all of you. Like the arrogance. And so yeah, she officially resigns from Joe Biden's Disinformation Governance Board and the DHS Gov. She felt like the target. So according to this guy Eric Aguilar, she said, "Yeah, I cannot make this up, but apparently she felt like the target of harassment and was a victim of cyberbullies." In fact, let me look at her Twitter to see if she actually has issued any statement, so I can get something direct. Because hey, in terms of, and that's the thing, that's my thing, because one of my, and by the way, yeah, I didn't even introduce myself. Yeah, I'm the jailhouse lawyer, uh, and as a jailhouse lawyer, I'm not an actual licensed and practicing attorney. I'm an individual that was incarcerated, and while I was incarcerated, I did a lot of my own legal work. I informally assisted others with their legal work, and did legal research, conducted legal research on myself, helped others conduct legal research, taught others how to conduct legal research. And so that part is what I want to point out. Like being at the point where you have to write a legal brief and you've got to source information. Like that makes it very important that when I'm reading something, I'm like, okay, what's the source? Because I realized that I got so much better at that after having gone through that, the whole process of doing legal work for myself, where I'm reading something and I'm automatically looking, okay, you're saying this, but where's the information to back this? Where are you getting this information from? And this is what I'm looking for. And so, in the same manner, if I'm going to talk about Nina Jankowicz, hey, what has she said anything directly, like on her Twitter account, that I can point to and discuss? So, okay, a pinned tweet is from April 25th. Okay, well, her pinned tweet from April 25th says, "Men burst violently into your mentions and your life like the Kool-Aid man, demanding your attention, hawking opinions that they believe are unarguably, manifestly correct and indispensable. A taxonomy of trolls excerpted from How to Be a Woman Online." So she's clearly says there's one thing a woman can count on is getting harassing messages online. So this seems like a prelude for, if that's part of her grounds for resigning from the governance board. Okay, so also, Glenn Greenwald. So Glenn Greenwald has tweeted. He says, also, it seems odd that the okay, interesting. Okay, so before I say what he's tweeted today, let me. He's quoting a tweet from Nina Jankowicz in on March 10th. Wow, not even March 10th. Yes, March 10th, 2021. So apparently, yeah, there's like that's what I'm saying. There's You can't sit here and say that this woman is an unbiased, like she's in this political sphere already. She's beefing with people in this political sphere. Like you can't here and pretend that she's an honest, unbiased actor that will use this power granted to her uh benevolently and objectively. So disgusting. Glenn Greenwald's attack on Taylor Lorenz fueled a Tucker Carlson monologue last night. Online harassment against women is real. It's insidious and it has offline effects. We have the receipts and you're back. And so she's clearly a friend of Taylor Lorenz. And so now Glenn Greenwald is reporting on, and so that, remember, that's 2021. So Glenn Greenwald is quoting that tweet and talking about what's happened today. He said, also, it seems odd that the Washington Post allowed Taylor Lorenz, who, credit where due, broke the story of the DHS pause, to write an entire article arguing Nina Jankowicz should be off limits from criticism without mentioning Jankowicz argued the same about Lorenz. Like, that's a great point. Because, like, how do you consider, like, if this is somebody who's argued for you, like, oh, people shouldn't be criticizing her, and then you write the story, like, at what point does Washington Post say, okay, you've broken the story, that's great, you're not writing the story. You've broken the story, but like, if you're going to stick to the facts, but if you're going to editorialize and toss in your opinion, and once the editor reads that, he should be like, okay, yeah, like you're getting credit for breaking the story, but you're not writing the story. If we're going to stick to journalism and keep everything objective. But like, once again, this just further evidence. If you can't even get if even at these levels you're not getting that objectivity, that fairness, that just let's call it down the plate. How do you think these people in government positions with no accountability are going to maintain those uh, principles, assuming they actually have any intention to? Okay, we're not assuming that. Let's so who is this? So this guy, some guy says, let me see who he is. Oh, he's got, yeah. So he says, let's all give thanks to brave journalists like Taylor Lorenz, who put their own credibility on the line to stake out the lonely but important case that the Mary Poppins impersonator, Nina Jankowicz, ought to be tasked with making profound judgments on truth for all Americans. So I'm guessing he's not a fan. And so a pause. Yeah, he's got a headline. The headline that Taylor Lorenz wrote is how the Biden administration okay, yeah, this is her headline. How the Biden administration let right-wing attacks derail its disinformation efforts. Totally objective. Nothing to see here. A pause of the Department of Homeland Security's newly created board comes after its head, Nina Jankowicz, was the victim of coordinated online attacks as the administration struggled to respond. See, when it's something you don't like, it's a coordinated attack. Now, how the Biden administration let the right highlight the insane authoritarian rantings of. Okay, so somebody has Washington Post has the scoop that the Disinformation Board is getting shut down, and surprised, yeah, and they're talking because a lot of people are talking about the framing. The framing shows a clear lack of objectivity. So Breitbart has some statements. They said the Department of Homeland Security is reportedly pausing the Disinformation Governance Board 3 weeks after its creation was challenged by Republicans. I actually wonder if it would have passed constitutional muster. I know I remain confident that its operation would not have been content neutral. There's no doubt in my mind that they would have. And so content neutral applies in First Amendment context in terms of that if there's going to be limitations of speech, like it can't be based on, well, we like this speech, but we don't like that speech. So it can't be with regard to what the content is. But like I said, there was, I think they realized that they were actually, so that actually makes me realize that they're getting rid of this governance board isn't actually a good thing, because having this as as an official agency would have limited its power. So if they do this on unofficial means, then they would not have to face the same level of scrutiny and compliance with the First Amendment. Okay. Okay, so Congressman Byron Donalds, he's out of Florida. So he writes, Nina Jankowicz must have gotten tired of flagging her boss's tweets as disinformation. Goodbye, Ministry of Truth. Hello, freedom. He says Republicans will continue to fight for freedom and stand up to the Biden administration's Orwellian tactics. This is America, not North Korea. And he is out of Florida. I find that interesting, considering some of DeSantis's acts and its relation to the First Amendment, because DeSantis has some antics that I think will also not stand up to constitutional scrutiny. And this is what I'm talking about. This is why you can't trust the government to be in charge of policing speech, because you'll have people on this side policing it in their favor. You have people on that side policing in their favor. Like, no, we're adults. We'll make determinations as to what we believe and don't believe, as to what we can say and don't say. So I'm trying to see if there's any tweets that are like in favor of her. So yeah, there's a lot of people clearly that aren't fans of her. Yeah, a lot of people aren't fans of her or Taylor Lorenz. So this guy, he's a media reporter for Fox News. Joseph Wolfson, he says Washington Post Taylor Lorenz runs cover for victim, and he puts victim in quotation, Nina Jankowicz, while reporting DHS put a pause on the so-called disinformation. And he also puts this in Disinformation Governance Board in quotation. Chris Rufo says he nominates Tel Lorenz to succeed Nina Jankowicz as the director. Okay, no, sorry, no. So I just went to. He said libs of TikTok. I thought that was for some reason I was thinking of that as so yeah. He said I nominate libs of TikTok to succeed Nina Jankowicz as director of the Disinformation Board. And you see where we go. This is what I'm saying. So many people don't mind government violating free speech, don't mind government policing speech as long as it's their team. As long as their team is doing it, they're cool with it. No, that's unacceptable. The problem is government should not be policing speech. Government should not be the arbiter of which, like, the government should have the full ability to say, hey, this is the accurate information and this is what we're putting out there. And without interfering with other people saying, oh no, well, we disagree, we think it's this. Okay. People then have the ability to read, to choose what they read and decide what they're going to believe. Okay, so yeah, I do want to get to this story. So Aaron Mate, who's a like an independent journalist, he actually shared an article from The Nation. And this talks about Nina Jankowicz, what she did prior to being the head of the Disinformation Governing Board. So she has okay, so she was Jankowicz's experience as a disinformation warrior includes her work working for Stop Fake, a U.S. government-funded anti-disinformation organization that was founded in March of 2014. It was lauded as a model of how to combat Kremlin lies. 4 years later, okay, so this is in terms of disinformation. I find it funny when the war broke out, Ukraine and Russia, and there were people like saying, so Russia, Putin came out and said, oh, Nazis and freedom, and like he's trying to paint this picture as if he cares about freedom, and that's the picture he's painting. I mean, you can look at Putin's track record and see freedom isn't exactly his number one priority, isn't exactly his primary objective. But okay, he says he's going after Ukraine because of the Nazis, and then people started responding. The Ukrainian president is Jewish. That doesn't even make any sense. So what I did was I just started, because I had actually remembered reading some information. So I just did quick little Google searches and found articles from several years ago that talked about the Azov battalion and how people in the administration, people in the government were worried about the neo-Nazis, this neo-Nazi like paramilitary organization growing in power and strength within Ukraine. And I'm like, this is from years ago. This is from years ago. So these attempts, because now the media started putting forth this pretense that, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, no, there were articles about this from years ago. So clearly this isn't just out of nowhere. Now, whether or not that's his actual objective, okay. But now you're trying to act like it's not even reality. That doesn't make sense, because we can see that the government was actually concerned about this and raising alarm bells about this years ago. But now all of a sudden it's not an issue. And so here in this article, it says one of the things that Stop Fake was doing was Stop Fake 4 years later, and this is 4 years after 2014, Stop Fake began aggressively whitewashing two Ukrainian neo-Nazi groups with long track records of violence, including war crimes. Like, wow. Yeah. So today, Stop Fake is an official Facebook fact-checking partner, which gives it the power to censor news, while Jankowicz, was at the time of this story, she is currently was the America's disinformation czar. And so that's what she wanted across social media, where you have these people that get to change, the people that get to go into social media and suppress information they don't like. And so now listen, Facebook is a private company. If they want to do that, I'm like, okay. But I love that what they're doing is creating a lane for their own obsolescence. Because if you want to start suppressing information, then people can't rely on you. You become as useless as your CNNs, your Fox News, your MSNBCs, and all of this media that only puts one side out there. You become useless. If you're only going to put one side out there, then guess what? Why do we need you? We can actually go and find a wealth of information out there from other sources. And so if Facebook and these other companies want to do this of their own volition, want to have the skewed messaging that they're putting out there, that's their choice. It will be great to see it'll be great to see the response in terms of people saying, you know what, I'm not with this anymore. I'm not gonna, this is some nonsense, and we're gonna start rocking on a different social media platform. Therefore, like, you can facilitate your own destruction, your own demise. Because perfect example of what Facebook did. Remember last year when the New York Post broke the story about BLM and Patrisse Cullors Patrisse Cullors, the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, of her buying a bunch of homes, for that amount to several $1,000,000 of value. And I posted that story on Facebook, and it was blurred. Like, oh, this information is not being, like, I'm like, what? Like, they suppressed the information. And it's like, why? Like, they actually, so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people like this, groups like this, that suppress information that they don't like. They suppress information that disagrees with whatever narrative they want to push forward. Like I said, they've already demonstrated they can't be trusted. So if the Biden administration, like, who will guard the guardians? So Stop Fake was founded right after Ukraine's 2014 made an uprising, uh, ousted the country's president, and then swept the new US-backed government into power. Formed by professors and students from the Kiev Moya, I'm not even pronouncing it right, journalism school, Stop Fake presented itself as a plucky grassroots group wielding hard facts and semi-permanent smirks as it shredded Russian propaganda. It said it produced slick videos hosted by dynamic disinformation warriors debunking the Moscow lies of the day. They said it began receiving funding from Western governments, the National Endowment for Democracy. That's an organization mainly funded by the U.S. Congress and the British Embassy in Ukraine. They said it was supported by George Soros's Open Society Foundation. So they said Stop Fake has run numerous episodes that cover Soros, but failed to disclose this potential conflict of interest, a violation of the basic tenets of journalism. So once again, when you lack objectivity, you can't sit here and claim, oh, we're going to be straight down the line, and you've already demonstrated. So like, she's part of this organization that's already showing that Okay, y'all aren't even being objective, and you're not even sticking to the basics of journalism. So she was one of the hosts, and so they said on January 29th, 2017, she hosted Stop Fake episode 117, whose lead story dealt with a perennial obsession of Russian propaganda, Ukraine's volunteer battalions. And so there are dozens of paramilitaries formed uh, in 2014 that were formed in 2014 to fight Russian separatists. And they said the Russian press was bristling at Kiev creating a new holiday to honor military volunteers. And they so Russia's spin was, oh, these are far right butchers. And so her spin, so the quote from her is volunteer, but this is from her. Her quote was volunteer battalions organized throughout the country, and they supported weak Ukrainian armed forces and prevented further Russian separatist encroachment. Today, the volunteer battalions are part of the official Ukrainian armed forces overseen by the Defense and Interior Ministries. The volunteer movement in Ukraine extends far beyond military service. Volunteer groups are active in supporting Ukraine's military with food, clothing, medicine, and post battle rehabilitation, as well as working actively with the nearly 2 million internal refugees displaced by the war in Ukraine. And so they said while she was doing this, they showed patches of 4 different paramilitaries: Idar, Dnipro, Donbass, and Azov. So they said, according to this, all 4 of them have documented records of war crimes, but Azov is the one I've heard about, and they point out in this story is an outright neo-Nazi group. And so they even talk about how Newsweek ran an article in 2014 said Ukrainian nationalist volunteers committing ISIS-style war crimes. Let me actually pull up that story. See, that's got to pull up the sources. Dame Sharkov, September 10th, 2014. I'm trying to go back. Okay, Nation Story. They said, so it looks like Amnesty International has actually issued reports concerning IDAR and Dnipro 1, uh, using starvation of civilians, using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare is a war crime. Okay. But this is what I'm saying. So if you're dealing with somebody who who already in her history has demonstrated that she's not going to be even-handed, that she's a propagandist, that she has very firm and persistent biases, this is the person you're going to put in charge of disinformation? That makes no sense. Because even if you believed in it, then you needed to get somebody that was just a straight arrow down the line, or somebody that could that had demonstrated the ability to say, I don't have to agree with it, but I'm going to be even-handed. I'm going to be just keep everything um uh down the line. Like I'm gonna call balls and strikes all the way across. Um so I know right now a lot of people are watching the so yeah, I know right now a lot of people are watching the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. But once this story came out, I said, yeah, I got to cover this. Somebody got to cover this because this is interesting. This is, and like I said, I'm glad it is, but at the same point, they're not done. They're not done by miles. Like this is social media has the potential to disrupt government propaganda too much for them to just go, okay, oh well, we'll just let people freely exchange information and ideas. No, the fight is going to continue. The assault on Section 230 is real. I tell you, the assault on Section 230 is real. But like the question is, what are they planning next? Like really, what are they planning next? How are they planning to implement it? And that's just one of the things that people have to be vigilant about. Okay, listen. So this is somebody talking about the story. Once again, like I say, I'm going to keep repeating. I have not read the Washington Post article. The Washington Post article is behind a paywall. I'm not paying for it. So if you want to pay for it, if you already have a subscription to Washington Post article, you can go check it out. It's written by Taylor Lorenz. But what he says is, I really appreciate the fact that we're told 3 times in the first 2 paragraphs that Nina Jankowicz has excellent credentials to be the head of a dystopian Ministry of Truth. Now, his statement isn't objective either, but hey, it is what it is. She's very well qualified to do this unconstitutional thing, you guys. So if you're going to editorialize, make sure people know you're well, I mean, I know he's editorializing, but like don't claim you're doing objective journalism and you're editorializing. The news here, so Byron York, chief political correspondent from the Washington Examiner. The news here underneath the heavy Washington Post spin is that the Department of Homeland Security has paused the operations of its new Disinformation Governance Board. Nina Jankowicz deciding whether or not to stay. Okay, so Taylor Lorenz. Okay, see? So listen, this is what's key. But this is from 3 hours ago. Yeah, so this one's from 3 hours ago. I'm guessing, and I'm going to double check, that I'm guessing in the past 3 hours she has actually left. Because Taylor Lorenz has said, scoop, just 3 weeks after its announcement, the Disinformation Governance Board is being paused, and interdepartmental working groups focused on disinformation have been suspended. Nina Jankowicz is considering leaving. And so I've got to. Okay, so let me read the rest of Taylor Lorenz's tweet. She says the pause of the newly created disinfo, and once again, this is from 3 hours ago. The pause of the newly created Disinfo Governance Board comes as its head, Nina Jankowicz, has been the target of vicious, coordinated right-wing attacks, which government officials have failed to effectively counter. Interviews with sources inside the DHS on the Hill, along with disinfo experts, show how Jankowicz was set up to fail by an administration unsure of its messaging and unprepared to counteract the coordinated far-right online campaign against her. The decision to pause the Disinfo Governance Board caps a wild back-and-forth week of decisions that changed during the course of reporting this story. On Monday, the DHS decided to shut down the Disinformation Governance Board entirely. Okay, so listen. On Monday, the DHS decided to shut down the Disinformation Governance Board entirely, and Jankowicz drafted a resignation letter in response to the board's dissolution. Then, late last night, they decided it would simply be paused. Last night, Jankowicz was pulled into an urgent call with DHS officials who gave her the choice to stay on, even as the department's work was put on hold due to the backlash it faced. Interdepartmental working groups within DHS focused on mis, dis, and malinformation have been suspended. The board itself could still be shut down permanently pending a review from the Homeland Security Advisory Council. Jankowicz is currently evaluating her position within the department. After attempting to defend herself and her reputation online, she was told by the administration to stay silent while enduring unrelenting attacks and violent threats. Okay, so now let me start that. If she's getting violent threats, jibber jabbing at people online doesn't solve that. If she's getting violent threats, that's when the government has to step in, the authorities have to step in and start assessing these threats. Cool. But the whole point of her being told to stay silent, like a lot of people, if you're in a company, if you're working for a company and there's people that are criticizing the company or criticizing you, your job is to shut up. Like, we have a bottom line, we have a professional image to maintain. You're not here to get into beefs with people regarding the company. So that's not a thing. That's not a legitimate criticism. Oh, they told us to stay silent. Yes, because if you're going to be a professional, be a professional. If you're the boss, like if you're running your own company and that's how you want to handle it, cool. But if you're working for a company, and traditionally companies will say no, you don't get into beefs with people. Like if they say this, okay, have a nice day. If you respond at all, if any vulgar or disrespectful stuff, you just let it go. You just keep going about and doing your job. 15-year veteran of the DHS called the department's response to the controversy mind-boggling. I've never seen the department react like this before, he said. Its failure to protect Jankowicz shows the admin's inability to counter far-right disinfo campaigns. Jankowicz's experience is a prime example of how the right-wing internet operates, where far-right influencers set the discourse cycle and pick vulnerable targets to hurl into a feedback loop with the aim of discrediting and attacking them. A 52-page report by Advanced Democracy Incorporated outlines the massive scope of the far-right campaign against Jankowicz. So I'm actually going to look at that report, and I'll probably do a separate video on that. Every single day, right-wing media and far-right influencers flood the internet with smears and lies about her and her work. My story details those attacks. I wonder if if she covers in her story the story from The Nation that I was just talking about. What Nina Jankowicz has been put through over the past 3 weeks is a horrifying and cautionary tale. Legacy institutions, including the government, media orgs, and academic institutions, are largely unprepared for countering these right-wing online attack campaigns. Dozens of websites, including Breitbart, the Post Millennial, and the New York Post, have mined thousands of Jankowicz's past social media posts, publishing articles that mischaracterize her comments. Each post has been misrepresented to spark maximum outrage. So right then and there, that tells me somebody taking your own words. Now, people can take your words out of context, definitely. The response to that is to place them in context. That's it. But what she's saying here, and what she's making clear, is that with somebody like her, somebody who has the mind of Taylor Lorenz, they're not going to just put things in context. They're not just going to respond. They're actually going to suppress these as disinformation. So not acknowledging that there's spin, and a bunch of times people can look at the same thing and come to different conclusions. No, it's going to be labeled disinformation and be subject to suppression, if not just like suspension and stuff like that. DHS staffers have grown frustrated with the department's suspension of all intradepartmental working groups, interdepartmental working groups focused on mis, dis, and malinformation. Staff felt it was an overreaction that gave way too much credence to bad faith actors. Some people do not find the government or people like Taylor Lorenz to be a good faith actor. Like, it's amazing the level of subjectivity in determining whether or not somebody is a good or bad faith actor. The week following Jankowicz's announcement, approximately 70% of Fox News 1 hour segments mentioned either Jankowicz or the board. Fox News coverage was referenced in some of the most popular posts on Facebook and Twitter attacking Jankowicz. Far-right harassment and smear campaigns all follow the same playbook, and it's critical that the public and leaders in government, media, and educational bodies start to learn how these cycles operate and how to effectively counter them. They tried to divide people by these single, decontextualized moments. Emerson T. Brooking said, in Nina's case, it's a few comments out of thousands. They fixate on these small instances and they define this villain. Then they start building a mythology around them. But isn't that what press does? Like, isn't that what media does, period? Like, okay, this is the quote, and they're going to run with it. But once again, it's not about, the problem isn't that it's being done. It's that it's being done by someone else. That's the problem. Time and time again, the problem isn't that it's being done. It's being done by someone else. That's the problem. That's what gets them mad. That's what gets them infuriated. That's what has them up in arms. So let me just double check. And in fact, let me go straight to Taylor Lorenz's, because I thought I saw. Okay, yeah. So that was 3 hours ago. And then 2 hours ago, she says Taylor Lorenz, and it's a pinned tweet as of right now. Update. In fact, let me. Okay, let me just pull it up. It says update. Nina Jankowicz. Update. Nina Jankowicz has officially resigned from the Disinformation Governance Board and the DHS. Yeah. So that was from 3 hours ago, and then 2 hours ago, she officially resigned. So 1 minute ago, Taylor Lorenz wrote a bit about the board's rollout. Several sources I talked to on the Hill who work in this area said they were totally caught off guard. They only learned about the board's existence from Daniel Lippman's scoop in Politico and had no additional context info on it. So the statement from a DHS spokesperson about the board itself. Secretary has requested that the Homeland Security Advisory Council's final recommendation within 75 days. During the HSAC's review, the board will not convene and its work will be paused. So, statement from Nina Jankowicz and from a DHS spokesman from Jankowicz, with the board's work paused and its future uncertain, and I have decided to leave DHS to return to my work in the public sphere. So, in fact, yeah, let me pull up her. Okay, her statement from Nina Jankowicz. After 6 years dedicated to the study of disinformation and best practices in responding to it, I joined the Department of Homeland Security to be the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board with the intention of supporting the department's important work addressing disinformation that affects the homeland. With the board's work paused and its future uncertain, and I have decided to leave the DHS to return to my work in the public sphere. It is deeply disappointing that mischaracterizations of the board became a distraction from the department's vital work, and indeed, along with recent events globally and nationally, embodies why it is necessary. I maintain my commitment to building awareness of disinformation's threats and trust the department will do the same. Statement from the DHS spokesman: the board's purpose has been grossly and intentionally mischaracterized. It was never about censorship or policing speech in any manner. Quite the opposite. It was designed to ensure we fulfill our mission to protect the homeland while protecting core constitutional rights. As its executive director, Nina Jankowicz was subjected to unjustified and vile personal attacks and physical threats. As the secretary has repeatedly said in congressional hearings and in the media interviews, Nina is eminently qualified to do this work. We know she will continue to be a leader in this field. DHS remains committed to the important work it has done for nearly a decade to combat disinformation that threatens the homeland, including disinformation spread by smugglers and foreign nation states. And this is the mischaracterization I'm talking about, because you're talking about smugglers and foreign nation states, and then let's talk about something like the New York Post, because you see how Taylor Lorenz mentioned the New York Post as one of the source of attacks against Nina Jankowicz. You know why the New York Post is pissed off? Because the New York Post back in 2020, they published an article about Hunter Biden and the Hunter Biden laptop, and Twitter won't let them. Twitter takes down their Twitter page. Oh, this is disinformation. This is false information. Fast forward, now we find out it wasn't false information. So you see what I'm talking about? This is why people are pissed. And this is why people should be pissed. And they still refuse to acknowledge that, yes, this is about censorship. Yes, this is about making sure you are the only people, you are the only ones to control the narrative. That's exactly what this is about. That's completely what this is about. But they will try to spin this as if, no, this is just about respecting people's freedom of speech and national security. No, this is clearly a political animal. Stop it. And I like what John Stewart said, because John Stewart, in fact, I think he was talking about this Disinformation Governance Board. I'll double check that and find out. But he says, if you are going to if you're going to operate in this manner and say, okay, we're going to ban speech that we consider disinformation. He says, what about when I was speaking about the Iraq War and that there were no weapons of mass destruction? They would have found me, that John Stewart, guilty of spreading disinformation. They would have shut me down. They would have stopped me from speaking because, oh, this is false information. This is disinformation. And then come to find out, he was right. The ones spreading the disinformation, the ones spreading the misinformation, the ones spreading the malinformation, the ones who got the United States involved in an illegal war that cost so many lives were the government, were these so-called trusted sources. These trusted sources were the ones that were lying. So it's amazing that time and time again, we can see this demonstrated. And these people refuse to acknowledge it. But that just proves why they are so completely, totally untrustworthy. They can't be trusted because they don't even want to acknowledge how they've already demonstrated that they're not acting in furtherance of no, we're not trying to censor anybody. You're constantly making statements and attempting actions that make it clear that's not accurate. That's not at all accurate. But Nina Jankowicz has resigned. The board is on pause, and they're going to be considering whether or not it even continues to exist. But I think the key point for all of us to realize is, even if the board is gone, like you said, you listen to her statement where she says, "Oh, I'm going to remain committed to. I'm going to go back to the public sphere." So she's still going to be working You still got a bunch of these people that are going to be out here working on doing things to make sure that only one narrative or their side of the story is told. I mean, the fight isn't over. It's like I said, the fight isn't over. These people have not just decided, okay, free speech, free information, let people decide for themselves. Nah. Media is the fourth branch of government, and they want to make sure they control it completely. Because social media kind of started throwing that into disarray. Because remember, the fourth branch of government, media, was your official, your mainstream media sources that are carefully controlled by very big and powerful people. When you have social media, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have YouTube, you've got Instagram, TikTok, you've got these where regular people, regular Joe Schmoes can make videos, write, articles, make statements that are counter to narratives, counter to established and approved narratives, and reach millions of people. And the powers that be don't like that. They don't like having their power challenged. Thank you for checking out this live stream. Well, checking out this video, because I'm going to keep this posted after this live stream is done. And if you like what I'm talking about, and if you have any suggestions of stuff you want me to cover, feel free to put that down in the comment on things that you want to see me cover in the future. I'm intending to cover a lot more legal stuff as well. So not just political, because this is very big with First Amendment, and that is definitely something I'm going to be covering on this channel, Jailhouse Law, First Amendment, and threats to our First Amendment rights, threats to our constitutional rights across the board. Like even right now, I'm currently suing New York City over the mandates, and even though the key to New York City, which was like a vax passport, even though that one has been stopped, I'm still suing the city on damages for that one because that was a clear violation of First Amendment rights. And so that's definitely part of the things we discuss on this channel, from threats to our constitutional rights and case law, popular cases that are in the news right now. So I'm gonna be talking. I'll do some coverage of the Heard death trial. I know, like right now, everybody's watching it, but like I don't. I have other stuff I'm gonna be doing as well. But I'll do some like just recaps of some information, stuff that I found interesting from that trial. And like I said, if there's stuff that you want to see me cover on this channel, let me know in the comment section, and that's part of the stuff I'll start taking a look at and providing content on. Thank you for checking out Jailhouse Law, and let's get to work.